1 minute. Last meeting.
I forgot it today.
Okay.
That's the problem.
That's okay. There were a lot of logo notes back there, and I didn't want to
Oh,
give you
no,
something
that's fine. That's fine.
That's Ingracia. Janice is Ingracia, Mike. Lamisha. 6 is the word. It says 100. That's the main one that Shane.
The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Balmer. Alderman Lappy. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Peel. Alderman Todd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Walker. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Gross. President Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Page. Alderman Kotar. Alderman Balmer. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Cone. Alderman Gross. 17 present.
A quorum being present, we will be led in prayer by Pastor James E. Holloway Jr. from Solomon's Temple Church.
To the aldermen, to all you all are here, thank you for having me, and thank you, before I pray, for your service to our communities. I believe that our highest value is the value that we bring to others. And Jesus said something. He said, love others as I have loved you. Let's pray. Let's bow our heads. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time. Thank you for life. Thank you for health. We thank you for strength. We thank you for your kindness and your divine love. We pray for wisdom. We pray for divine guidance. We pray for spiritual assistance. We pray for peace and hope and love over our nation, over our country, over our city, over our communities. And we pray for unity throughout this land. And we pray for everybody's family that's here represented, whether the need is physical, spiritual, financial, mental, emotional. God, we thank you for meeting every need. God, thank you for strengthening us. God, may we continue to come together in love. May we continue to come together in understanding. Reveal truth to us and reveal knowledge to us and the way that we should go. We give you glory, honor, and praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
We will dispense with line item 3, any introduction of honored guests. Alderman from the 23rd.
Always, I'd like to have my good friend Greg Meyer, who's not here with me today. He's homesick, but I'd like to have him as my special guest today.
Okay. Alderwoman from the 27th.
Thank you, Madam President and the board. In honor of Black History Month and as the chair of the African American Automatic Caucus, I would like to recognize Hudson Embassy at 3818 Page Boulevard. And they have been in business for over 60 years, and they're a record shop. And so I don't think people this day and age recognizes that record shops and people are coming back to the LPs and the record players. And so I was really honored when I met Mr. Hudson, because I told him it was unique because I didn't even know that we still had record shops in our city. So I would like us to recognize Hudson Embassy.
Alderwoman from the 2nd.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to recognize and have as my special guest My Mother's Roots Daycare Center located at 8231 North Broadway in the 2nd Ward currently, and they are doing phenomenal things with children at the daycare center, so thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman from the 4th.
Wait a minute. All righty. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge JoJo's Restaurant that's on Martin Luther King and Whittier. Stop by. He can use your business, and the food is excellent.
Alderwoman from the 21st.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. I would like to acknowledge and thank the owner of Angels Within, who is also doing a tremendous development project between Alice and Adelaide. Ms. Karen Greer, who is the owner and proprietor and developer of that establishment. So we'd like to thank her for that. But additionally, if I can just take a moment to acknowledge that, this being our last day, and so many of us have been here, well, many of you have been here for a long time. I just got here in August. But I do want to thank everyone for their warm reception. And I thank you all for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom, and sometimes your grace and your mercy on this floor, where we have sometimes had conflict, but we've also had times where there was, compromise. There's been progress, and all of this is done in the name of the great people of our city of St. Louis. And so for that, I would just like to thank all of my peers here today, and wish Godspeed to those of us who will not be back. I'm claiming in the mighty name of Jesus, I will be here. So you will have to deal with me again. Amen.
A further introduction of honored guests. Alderman from the 18th.
Since this is Black History Month, and I'm going to stay on topic, and I don't want anybody to say I'm out of order, but since I know that this body, and all the way from Africa to how we got over here, our experience has been different. And so I'm going to take a few minutes and show you the differences in our experience since we've been here. One, we were called property. We were slaves. And we worked for almost 300 years, for more than 300 years, and for free. And so we've contributed more labor to this country than anybody else in this country for free. But we've been treated worse than anybody else. And I'm not exaggerating. Let me quickly go through something. After getting out of slavery, we had to have a civil rights bill, especially for us. In 1875, it was rescinded in 1883. Then in so we were segregated. Then in 1896, the government itself made it legal to segregate us for more than 60 years. Just us, the people who had worked for free to clear the land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Then we had to have another law, Brown versus Board of Education, to be able to use public facilities. Then another law in 1864, the Voting Rights Act, when the Constitution clearly said in 1865, 66, that all men in America could vote. Everybody, but we couldn't. Then in 1919, all women were supposed to vote, but black people couldn't vote. Okay, but businesses, I'm gonna get to the businesses. As to why we don't have big businesses in our community. And so we've been discriminated against, and I'm gonna talk about the business, but I have to give some background. So when I get to the businesses in our community, I have a business on Martin Luther King called Metric Cleaners. That business has been there, good business. I want people to shop there. It's on, I think it's Marcus and Dr. King. But houses around that business have been torn down, so the prices have to go up or they have to go out of business. That's just it. So the point is, we would have more businesses if we had gotten reparation for the labor we provided, if we had not torn down all those houses in North St. Louis that could have been saved, we would have had more businesses. So the point is, even though I have a business in my ward that I'm asking you to shop in, and not in my ward, in the 18th ward, it belongs to the residents. So I made a mistake and I misspoke. But the point is, this is Black History Month, and the reason we had to celebrate it is because we were left out of history by the white printers and publishers. And that need to be known, and I'm unapologetic. Why should I apologize and not take up time when my ancestors were forced to work for 300 years, another 100 years, being treated different and still being treated different? Right today. And I can say, and I'm going to stop after this, today in St. Louis, the headquarters we were raided at gunpoint, the headquarters, only because we were having businesses and trying to do for self, were not allowed, were mistreated because we are black. That's the only reason, and we are constantly being mistreated. And so I thank you and I yield back, but I'm taking this time because we haven't been given this time at the City Hall in the past. And so I deserve the time, and I should be able to take all day, but thank you, I won't do that because I respect everybody.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Madam President. Going along with the theme of Black History Month, I would also like to recognize as a special guest Chandra Davis, who is the owner of Lefty's Fried Rice in beautiful Benton Park at 3000 South Jefferson, and they are known as the first 100% black-owned rice house in the state of Missouri. So everyone go out and support Lefty's Fried Rice and support my good friend Chandra Davis. But then I would also like to recognize my constituent, Danielle Spradley, and Alejandro Santiago from Alderwoman Amy Rice's ward, and Danielle Spradley from the wonderful 9th ward, from Cori Bush's, our Congresswoman Cori Bush's office, and they wanted me to remind everyone that your Congresswoman loves you. So, thank you.
Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to also add Alejandro as my special guest as one of our newest U.S. citizens. So thank you so much, and congratulations. And to recognize a couple of black-owned businesses in the 8th Ward. As always, Sweet Art and Rain is continuing to operate Sweet Art. She was going to maybe take a break for a little bit, but she is continuing. So if you have not gotten the best vegan soul food in town, or comfort food, I think maybe is more correct, please come on down to the Shaw neighborhood and get some Sweet Art. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 17th.
Good morning. Good morning. I would like to recognize Creole with a Splash of Soul. Rhonda Walker is the owner, and she started it during the pandemic, and she struggled a lot. And I am so happy that she is still open. On Sundays, the line is around the block. It's about a 45-minute wait, so be patient. But the food is wonderful, and it's a brand new Black business in Forest Park Southeast. So Rhonda Walker, congratulations.
Alderwoman from the 26th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Before I announce my business, I would like to have as my special guest Commissioner Brumman from the Division of Civilian Oversight, the Civilian Oversight Board, and our very own living legend, Black history, Black woman in the city of St. Louis, Attorney Ruby Bonner from the Division of Civilian Oversight here in the city of St. Louis. Thank you all for being here. And for my Black business, I would like to announce Dr. Marcus Howard. Dr. Marcus Howard is a young African-American male with the first Black-owned pharmacy here in the 26th Ward. It's called Greater Health Pharmacy Wellness. It's in the amazing Delmar Divine division that Maxine Clark had and has implemented. And it's at 5503 Delmar Boulevard, Suite B. The grand opening is on 2/28, on February the 28th, but he is open now. You can transfer your prescriptions to Greater Health Pharmacy and Wellness now. He delivers. He's doing an amazing job. He has some holistic ideas too about pharmacy in our community. So shout out to you, Dr. Howard. I'll see you on the 28th, if not before.
Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Madam President. Just want to give a shout out to Alibi Cookies in Dogtown. Mike Evans owns it. It's a Black-owned business. It has been an interesting addition to the to the neighborhood because they have a cookie bot outside, which is 24/7. You can get hot cookies. So if you're having a midnight craving, you can go down to Alibi and get warm chocolate chip cookies any time of the day or night. And so, yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Mike Evans and Alibi Cookies. Thanks.
Alderwoman from the 22nd.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. In honor of Black History, I'd like to give a shout out to Button and Bowles Preschool, who has been in the 22nd Ward for 49 years. They're located at 2819 Union, and they do 6 weeks to 12-year-old children, and they do before and after school programs as well. So thank you.
Alderwoman from the 20th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to recognize the Hop Shop at the corner of Cherokee and Jefferson. It is a Black-owned specialty beer shop, a specialty beer and spirits. Brothers Brian and Justin started that in an old, it was a former predatory business, a rent-a-center, and they've turned that spot into just a fabulous community gathering spot and a place where you can try local spirits and local beers, and it's really a fabulous tasting spot. And if last week's meeting is any indication about how today will go, I'll see you all there after the meeting.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Any further introduction of honored guests? Alderwoman from the 19th.
Does this work? Good.
Special order?
Okay.
Okay. We are, with no other introduction of honored guests, we will go back to line item 3 and take up the special order of the day.
I got one.
Oh, you have an introduction? Okay.
Yeah.
Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I'd like to recognize Latte Coffee Shop and Eatery. This is a family-owned business. They have one in Florissant, Missouri. They recently, in the middle of COVID, opened a facility at 2617 Washington Avenue, right at Jefferson. What I like about it is they are able to function as a family, run 2 businesses, have a lot of aspirations for expanding, and also knowing and understanding what community means. So they hire from the local colleges around. They make sure that people are trained well. As you all may know, if you drive by there or you have been there, The line is normally outside, down and around the corner. People come from all over the metropolitan area to eat the good food, get the great lattes with every flavor you can think of, and to Karen, who is the mama bear of the family. Go girl, I appreciate you.
Thank you. Any further introduction of honored guests? Alderwoman from the 4th.
Yes, I wanted to acknowledge as my honored guest today, Barbara Martin. She is also my sorority sister, and I'm just elated to see her here today. Thank you.
A further introduction of honored guests. Alderwoman from the 1st.
Madam President, members of the board, I'd also like to introduce as my honored guest Barbara Martin, who I have represented for 30 years now. She lives in the old 20th, the real 20th, the current 1st, soon to be the 12th. We got a lot of different numbers that go behind us, and we still live in the same house at all these times. I also would like to introduce as my honored guest the strip of natural bridge between Marcus and Union. What people don't know is most of the businesses there are black owned. We have Stephanie Brothers, Auto Body and Detailing. Stephanie is a very, very good auto repair person and a good businessman, keeps his businesses immaculate. If you go to the Burger King, that's right down the street from that, that is black owned. There's a florist up there that is black owned. The gas station at Kings Highway and Natural Bridge, which I encourage everybody who lives in North St. Louis to go to, actually is owned by somebody black. The strip mall that is owned between Geraldine and Norwood, black built and black owned. We also have Wade's Funeral Home, black owned. We have a used, not appliance, but furniture and miscellaneous items, black owned. So we have a long-term list of black owned businesses in our community that people take for granted and don't know that they are black. Oh, and the McDonald's, I'm sorry, and the McDonald's, if you go to Natural Bridge and Kings Highway, is black owned. So I want all those black owners to be my guests, because as I've built big things in my community, I've also tried to work very hard to also support black businesses. You don't grow if you don't teach each one, reach one, and teach one. The strip mall, I used to have I had that built back in the 90s. I had my office in it, and former state senator Jamila Nasheed, that's how I first met her, because she called me to ask me about coming to the strip mall, and so she had her office next to me, had Mama Jammas in there, had Pharaoh's Donuts started there. So you can start on Natural Bridge, and then you can really soar. So we just had a call from a well-known black business that was in the 19th Ward that's now coming to either Natural Bridge or Martin Luther King in the new 12th Ward. So come and do business with us. We're open for business. And thank you for all of those who are already operating not only wonderful businesses, but also financially sound and a good place to go and do your business. Come to Natural Bridge and do your business. Thank you.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 24th? 23rd, sorry.
You got it, 23rd. Yeah, I'd like to move for the approval of the
Oh,
minutes.
we're going to actually go back to the special order of the business.
Oh, okay.
Special order of the day, now that the Alderwoman from the 19th is here. So with that, we will dispense with the regular order of business to take up the special order of the day. Alderwoman from the 19th, you're recognized on the introduction of Courtesy Resolution 189.
Madam President, members of the board, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent.
We first have to suspend the rules since it wasn't
Well,
introduced.
Let's move to suspend the rules.
Okay. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 19th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Courtesy Resolution 189. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 19th, you are now recognized on the special order of the day.
Thank you very much. Resolution number 189 deserves really no introduction because it has been in the history of the city of St. Louis for over 75 years based on the movements and decisions that were made, some of them supported by law, some of them supported by that's just what we want to do. And it was an atrocity against a community of Native American, because a lot of people don't know there was a lot of Native Americans that lived in that area too, but most especially African Americans, to relocate them, dislocate them at will. These were people who not only had homes, they had businesses, they had relationships, their schools were well taken care of, they took care of their children, and you didn't have a lot of crime there. That was another thing we couldn't understand about that era. But we have a committee of people who have chosen to be determined for that area to be recognized and the history be told in the truest form possible. And for those of you who are present from the Mill Creek Valley Committee, I see Judith Arnold standing over here. Ruby Bonner, I think you're here. Barbara Martin, I see you're here. Is there anybody else here that I missed? I know Vivian Gibson was supposed to come over. But there's a long list of people who we will be recognizing as we move forward. Given the knowledge and the history of this, we know that we are beginning to acknowledge our wrong. And I want to give recognition to the St. Louis Soccer Park because they are providing a monument to honor it on Market Street. I want to also honor Harris Stowe because they're also recognizing what happened and they're going to have a monument on Market Street. I want to also recognize the Great River Greenway because they are looking at and applying recognition to this atrocity, and others will do the same. But what we want to do is make sure that the actual identification is noted for history, and we want to make sure that the history is told at any time, in any place that it is available to us. We must know our history so that we won't make that mistake again. I asked for you, I hope that you had a chance to read the resolution, and just for the sake of the record, because this is so important, Madam President, can it be read into the record, please?
Yes, Madam Clerk, if you would please read Resolution 189 into the record.
Whereas the members of the City of St. Louis Board of Aldermen hold in high esteem those neighborhoods that have contributed greatly to the history and culture of this city. And whereas the Mill Creek Valley neighborhood was a center of African American life in St. Louis, home to over 20,000 residents and 800 businesses, and whose inhabitants included Josephine Baker, Scott Joplin, and Madam C.J. Walker. And whereas the heart of the Mill Creek Valley neighborhood was approximately 450 acres and roughly bounded by Grand Boulevard on the west, Olive Street on the north, 20th Street on the east, and the railroad tracks on the south. And whereas in the late 1950s, virtually every building in that geography was raised in what was then termed blight removal and urban renewal. And over 20,000 residents, mostly African American, were displaced from their homes, businesses, and community. And whereas the City of St. Louis, in partnership with Harris Stowe University, the City Park Soccer Stadium, the Great Rivers Greenway Brick Line Greenway, former residents of the neighborhood, and other stakeholders wishes to identify and recognize Mill Creek Valley and those who live there, and remind and educate the citizens of St. Louis as to the injustice that forced removal. And whereas it is fitting and proper that the St. Louis Board of Aldermen should pause in its diverse legislative duties and responsibilities in order to recognize the enduring spirit of Mill Creek Valley and its contributions to the city's history and culture. Now there be it resolved by this Honorable Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to commemorate the history and culture of the Mill Creek Valley neighborhood and the disproportionate and unjust impact on African American St. Louisans due to its demolition. We further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented at the time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Introduced on this 10th day of February 2023 by the Honorable Marlene Davis, Alderwoman 19th Ward. Adopted this day, February 10th, 2023, as attested by.
Alderwoman from the 19th, would you like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 189?
I'd like to make a motion to please adopt.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 19th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th that we adopt Resolution 189. Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 26th.
Members of the board, I just want to thank Alderwoman Davis for bringing this resolution forward. I talk about it all the time how much of a nerd I am about history, but Mill Creek I study one of the most because of the way I used to hear my grandfather talk about it. And when you see people present on it, it's like you can really feel the spirit. When you see the pictures, they are amazing, inspiring, and encouraging of what we could still be, right? It had that not happened. And Vivian Dobson, I almost kind of follow her around when she speaks. And I love the way she says, we were here, right? We were here. So thank you again for bringing this resolution. I'd like to move that it be passed and by.
There's been a motion to, by the Alderwoman from the 26th to, and seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th that we approve the motion in bank. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 20th.
The board. I too want to thank the Alderwoman from the 19th for bringing this forward. I just wanted to take a quick moment to recognize local Black artist Damon Davis, who was the designer of the memorial there at St. Louis City Park, and recognize that our city has an incredible wealth of currently living Black artists, including Damon Davis, Stan Chisholm, Valencia Miss V, the list can go on and on, Brandon Vaughn, Christopher Birch. We have such a wealth of living Black artists that I wanted to just recognize here today. Thank you.
Further discussion, Alderwoman from the 1st.
Madam President, members of the board, I rise in support of this resolution. Mill Creek is a stain on the history of St. Louis. I wish it was the only time that it happened. It should have been the only time. We will soon, at some point, have to address what happened in the Central West End in the late 70s, and when they blighted with eminent domain and told the Black people that they were going to put them back. At that time, I think the Central West End was about 80% Black. It's the opposite now. It's the same thing that happened with moving the 20th Ward, the highest voting Black ward. Every time Black people have success in things, not only in this city, and many, many times, the move is to destroy it, to tear it up. That's why I'm never going to let you all forget that this board did a dishonorable thing by tearing up the highest voting ward, Democratic ward in the city. That's a dishonor. So it's not just Mill Creek. It is the Central West End. It is the 20th Ward. And as long as you continue and do not apply the lessons learned from history, and in this case, as long as you don't do some kind of reparations or some type of making it right, it will continue to be a stain on this city, and it will continue to bring down this city and not make it be the great city that it is. Cheating in any form, destroying neighborhoods in any form is a wrong thing. Is it especially wrong when the neighborhoods are successful and thriving at a time when there are so many things that's against them? The people in Mill Creek could not move hardly any further west at that time. We have a very famous house in the 4600 block of Labadie that will now become part of the new 12th Ward. And it was that Black people couldn't move across a certain place, and when the people moved into the Black people moved into the 4600 block of Labadie, right at Marcus, they were told, "You can't live here." and they had to go to court and fight and make sure that they were able to live in the house of their choice. When I first came to this board in 1991, one of the national news outlets came and did a thing on South St. Louis and went to have black and white people apply for housing and to buy cars and the whole thing, and guess what? It was still going on in that we didn't want black people in South St. Louis, so they would tell the black people that it cost more to rent an apartment or cost more to buy a house or cost more to even buy automobiles if they came to South St. Louis, and this was in the 90s. So that's why by the time it got to be 2001, I was surprised that successful black, high voting ward, don't lose population, we would do with this racism. When I come back here, which I intend to do, I intend for us to deal with that. I intend for us to give the real 20th Ward their $10 million back that you stole in ward capital. I intend for the city to own up to what it's done. When it's always easy 20, 50, 70 years later, oh, that was wrong. You don't need to wait 20, 50, 70 years later. You need to address these things when they happen. The Central West End, there absolutely ought to be some kind of addressing of what they did. It's all over the paper. Oh, we promise we're not going to move the black population. We're going to bring you back. No, they weren't. My husband worked at CDA when this happened, and he was a monitor in that area, and he told me they're never coming back. He's right. They haven't. And we keep building all this high-rise, white populated buildings to make sure that that doesn't happen. But there's a history of what happened. Mill Creek is one of them, but also it's the Central West End, and so is the 20th Ward. I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 19th for sponsoring this, and I see Ms. Arnold here. Thank her. I've spoken to Barbara Martin many, many times about Mill Creek and about the things that Ms. Arnold is doing to work on making sure that's never forgotten, and also about the green paths and things like that. I thank all of them, but I am not ever going to be satisfied with everybody someone's just saying, oh, let's memorialize this. No, let's make it right financially. Let's pay people back. You can never give me my right to vote. And I talk about my right to vote, but it was 2/3 of the people in my ward that you took their right to vote. But how do you fix that? And you not personally, but this Board of Aldermen, especially Francis Slay. I went to Tom Villa's wake. Matt Villa sat in the middle of the wake to explain to me he didn't know what he was doing and he was sorry. And as other people, now that they understand, they're like getting away from it. And they all put it on Francis Slay where it should be, because he was the mayor and should have done better. I don't believe that most of the people know, and many, many of them have apologized to me, but an apology is not enough. We need our money. We need to find some way for the city to acknowledge it's wrong, not only for Mill Creek, but the Central West End and for the 20th Ward, and I will continue to fight that battle. And again, I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 19th for sponsoring this resolution. We should never forget our checkered racist past, because we continue to do it over and over, and that's why we're so comfortable in getting up and saying, because nothing in the redistricting said, this is racist, this is wrong. Just like the Alderman from the 11th was saying about the mechanics bill. It doesn't scream overt racism now. There's something called covert racism that has a bad an outcome as possible. And that's what happened with Mill Creek, a horrible outcome. People hardly have any place they can live, but yet you're tearing up their communities and moving them out and making it something beautiful for somebody else to live, and then thinking that that's all right and that people are going to forget about it. We were here as a good thing, and we should still be there, and we should start claiming our history and making people financially responsible for how do you fix that. One of the things that happened with Mill Creek is that people migrated to the 4th Ward, to the Ville and around Sumner. They were the recipient of all of that. Because that happened, it made a very rich culture in the Ville, and I have a book called The Ville, Greater Ville, and I'm going to try to maybe get some more copies and share it with my colleagues, because it tells that story, because people start searching where they could live. So they got to the Ville, and then they said, but you can't come across this part. And then the Greater Ville, you can't live in the Greater Ville. So there's always been some place where people... there's always been some place in this city, many where black people couldn't live, and then you went and tore up the places where they did live, almost like you're saying you don't belong in the city. And I'm not talking to any of you specifically. I'm talking about this city and the rules and the people who were in place that did that, and a shame on them. And thank you, Ms. Arnold. Thank you, Ms. Martin. I saw Ruby up there. Hi, Ms. Bonner. How you doing? It's one of my sweeties. Thank all of you all for what you do, and thank the Alderwoman from the 19th.
Alderman from the 18th.
First of all, let me say the Mill Creek tragedy was a tragedy. And thank you, Alderwoman from the 19th. But we still have this tragedy going on right now. It started with Team 4, right in North St. Louis. We had these buildings boarded up on one floor, right today, that when it rains, snows, and any other inclement weather, those buildings eventually had to be torn down. So once those buildings are torn down, we are setting up a pattern, the same pattern that happened in Mill Creek, that happened in the Central West End, because I was a youth specialist. That's where I first started working as an older teenager, running programs in the anti-poverty program. And I worked in the Central West End. It was part of the area that I was working in. The point is, we should learn from the past of Mill Creek. We should learn from the past of the Central West End, because on Westminster, there was not a house north of a block north of Delmar right now that was worse than Olive Street, which was Gaslight Square, Washington, which was the Stroll, Gaslight Square, Westminster, which was one house all the way from Taylor to one or two houses all the way from Taylor to Vanderbilt. What is the point? The city, state, and federal government got together, and you go down Westminster, down that same area right today, you wouldn't believe the conditions that existed then. Why? So what is the point? The point is, we pay taxes north of Delmar. We can't even have, they make all kinds of excuses, including black and white people won't do it. Why we can't have the building boarded up on all floors so that the buildings don't have to be torn down? I'm going to say it again. And we would save money. The city would actually save money, save businesses, be safer, because the more houses you have on a block, the more eyes you have to watch for other people. For example, I walked from Delmar to West Florida not too long ago through Animal Lawn, and then I turned and went down Clay, where you have a lot of people. There aren't any vacant houses. But then one block or 2 or 3 blocks over, where you have vacant houses, every house was vacant. Why do I think all those houses were vacant? Because I used to live in the Ville. Why do you think those? Because once you start having vacant houses, it's like cancer. It spreads. People start burning them up. People start stealing. People start doing all kinds of stuff. What is the point? We can't do anything about, we should learn from our history. Unfortunately, Mill Creek is gone. It's not going to come back. Unfortunately, the Central West End is gone. People live there. It's not coming back, unfortunately. We can do something about north of Delmar. We can put windows in buildings when we use the word HUDs, housing and urban development. When we use the word urban, we're talking about black. It's a code word for black people, the same as crime and all kinds of other code words. We have been using the money, we have been writing the proposal for poor black people to the federal government, and for the last, a long time, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we've been fixing up, at least for the last 30, 40, because I know of that because I was working in the Central West End, and I was teaching school and teaching kids at Field Elementary School where I started teaching, and now it's an apartment. So the point is, and the kids can't, the point is that what we can do now, since we have the history does no good unless you can act on it. We all know the history. Now let's do something that we can do. Let's use that money to board up those buildings, buy the equipment we need, board up those buildings on all floors, and after 2 years, let's put some windows in so that all the buildings can blend in with the other buildings. And then we can do that. And then we won't have to spend more than $15 million a year cutting grass for vacant buildings. We won't have to have the wards north of Delmar, the future wards north of Delmar, as big as almost 8 or 9 wards, 5 wards almost as big, potential wards, almost as big as 9, the space. That means, so we can do something about that. If we don't do anything about it, first let me tell the black people it's your fault, it's our fault. Because we can't expect white people to save us. We are our own liberators. We're going to have to help. We have white friends here and all over the place. But your friend will help us if we help ourselves. If we don't do it, it's an indictment on black people, us as black leaders. That's all I'm going to say. And we pay taxes. I mentioned that we're forced to give up 300 years of free labor. There's no more, and the only thing required to be a citizen is to be born here. And so I'm going to stop, but thank you, but we need to do something. So what I'm asking is, before I leave this board, I'm not running again. If you're serious, first to the black people. And I'm calling it out. If you're serious, you will work to make sure that these buildings are boarded up. If you're not, you're just talking. And you're just showboating and talking. But if you are serious, you'll make sure what we can do. Because we can't do everything. But all I ask is, let's please as a board, let's always do what we can do and use the money in the most effective and efficient way for everybody, because blacks gonna be here and whites, but St. Louis will not grow. It will never grow. And you're never gonna get rid of us. So we all are citizens. It is in all our best interests to use our tax dollars to benefit all of us, and we will be safer. And that's all. And now the false narrative, and I'm gonna stop, about it's not about more police. The neighborhood that is safest has the most resources. Let me repeat that. The most resources, and we must utilize our resources to make everybody safe. Whites can't be safe because they're going to be robbed, and blacks can't be safe. And they said put them in jail, but let's do the right thing before we have to put anybody in jail. Thank you.
Any further discussion? With that, I would like to invite up to the dais the former residents of Mill Creek to formally accept the resolution. Go right ahead.
We'll take some when we're done, okay? Some pictures, okay? Again, good morning. This is really special, and I'm glad that members of the Mill Creek Valley Committee were able to be here this morning. I know that this is an opportunity for them to also put this in the archives as they tell the history as we are moving forward. It won't end today. It won't end this year. It won't end the next decade. We have a lot. We have an awful lot that we must admit, that we must find some remedy to, and that we must make sure that everyone who has the responsibility of governing this city and this region recognize the needs and make sure that all of the policies and all of the laws that are put in place have equal justice for all. In this resolution, as you heard and as it was read, the good works of God I must give to you today. Because you see, he works in mysterious ways. I had a project in the 19th Ward that failed. The project was called Mill Creek. And I had assigned some capital funds to help the project. So take a guess where those capital funds are going to now. It is going to the Mill Creek Valley Committee. And if you happen to have a few extra dollars, they could use it, because we have to have the Wayfair signage. We'll have to have some medallions for those buildings of importance where residents lived in Mill Creek that were important to this country on a higher level of giving. There's a lot that has to be done to make sure that this is appropriate and that it reflects our city well, and it's something that people will want to come off from all over the country. For those who used to live here and their grandchildren who know about it, we want it to be done well. And I tell you, I gotta say it again, God works in mysterious ways. How would you ever, you couldn't even plan it if you wanted to, that a project named Mill Creek failed, and it was already in my ward. I wouldn't have to go talk to somebody else. So it was real easy. So I'm very pleased today to honor you and ask you to accept this recognition on behalf of this Board of Aldermen and all of the many things that we wish we could do, but don't always have money to do. And look at where you're going. Most especially, look at what you've already accomplished. Vivian Gibson, in case nobody knows, raise your hand. She's already written a book about it because she used to live in Mill Creek. I love it. You're accepting?
I'm accepting.
All right, and please give us some words, Judy. Judith Arnold.
It's really something special when your work is being recognized. It's really something special when you are working with some formidable founders. Vivian Gibson, author of Children of Mill Creek, Dr. Malika Horn, author of Mother Wet, and our leader and pusher and facilitator, Barbara Martin. She brought us all together and made it very possible for this project to move forward. I appreciate very much the recognition that we're receiving today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think they want to take a picture of you guys holding the resolution, okay? If you don't mind, let's open it up so they can see it. Barbara, get in a picture here. Okay. I always stand in the back because I don't like pictures.
Put her in front of the resolution, maybe. Hold her.
All right, thank you.
It is often said that those who do not remember our history are doomed to repeat it. And I want to thank the former residents of Mill Creek Valley for coming today, for sharing your stories with us, for ensuring that we remember history so that this body may never repeat the wrongs of the past. We will move to the approval of the minutes. Alderman from the 23rd, you are recognized on the approval of the minutes from Tuesday, February 7th, 2023.
So I will move for the approval of the minutes from the February 7th meeting.
It's been moved by the alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the alderperson from the 14th, that we approve the minutes from Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in the aldermen's mailboxes.
I think we have.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board, Mr. Richard Bradley.
Alderwoman from the 13th, you're recognized for the mayor's appointment to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board.
Thank you. I move to accept the reappointment of Mr. Rich Bradley to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board.
It's been moved by the alderwoman from the 13th, seconded by the alderman from the 11th, that we confirm the appointment of Mr. Rich Bradley to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board, Mr. Aaron Williams.
Alderman from the 9th, you are recognized on the mayor's appointment of Mr. Aaron Williams to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we accept the mayor's appointment of Mr. Aaron Williams to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board.
It's been moved by the alderman from the 9th, seconded by the alderwoman from the 6th, that we confirm the appointment of Mr. Aaron Williams to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Industrial Development Authority, Mr. Jamal Seward and Mr. James Fowl.
Alderman from the 28th, or is Alderwoman from the 19th? You are recognized for the mayor's appointment of Mr. Jamal Seward and Mr. James Fowl to the Industrial Development Authority.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the
We have a second.
We have a second. We know where you were going. So it's been moved by the alderwoman from the 19th, seconded by the alderwoman from the 6th, that we approve the mayor's appointments to the Industrial Development Authority. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for reappointment to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board. Ms. April Ford Griffin.
Alderman from the 5th, you are recognized on the mayor's appointment of Ms. April Ford Griffin to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we support the mayor's appointment of Ms. April Ford Griffin to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board.
It's been moved by the alderman from the 5th, seconded by the alderwoman from the 13th, that we confirm the appointment of April Ford Griffin to the St. Louis Economic Development Tax Board. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll dispense with line item 7. Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off any of our informal calendars? Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off any of our informal calendars? Seeing none. First reading of board bills.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
We have none.
Alderman from the 16th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to request that Board Bill 55 be moved to the end of the third reading, final passage calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
First reading of board bills.
We have none.
Reference to committee.
We have none.
Second reading of report of standing committees.
The following board bills were reported out of the Streets Committee with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill number 141, as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Tyus, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service authorizing the 2022 St. Louis Works and the 50/50 sidewalk program citywide, providing for the construction and reconstruction of gutters, streets, driveways, spot curbs, sidewalks, alleys, traffic controls, beautification, tree planting, resurfacing, and related engineering adjustments listed herein, appropriating $9.8 million from the Street Improvement Fund, containing sections for description of the work, approval of plans and specifications, work and material guarantees, estimated costs from the city funds, and supplemental agreements and reversions, authorizations applicable state and federal rate requirements, equal opportunity provisions, the mayor's executive orders, contract advertising statutes, and public safety, and a public work emergency clause. Board Bill 154, as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of city residents by restricting motor vehicles access to alleys as provided herein in the Jeff Vanderloo Gate District West, Tiffany, and Midtown neighborhoods, and those portions of the Botanical Heights and Shaw neighborhoods located within the boundaries of the 19th Ward as had been established in ordinance number 68981. Board Bill number 156, as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Davis, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps and other street traffic calming installations to calm the flow of traffic on certain blocks in the 19th Ward. That is the extent of second reading.
Alderwoman from the 1st.
Madam President, members of the board, I'd move to suspend the rules to move Board Bill 141 as amended, and also 154 as amended and 156 as amended down to the perfection calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of moving the aforementioned bills to the you said perfection consent calendar?
That's fine too.
Okay.
I said perfection, but if nobody objects, consent is fine also.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Lappy. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Peel. Alderman Todd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Walker. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Gross. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Cone. 27 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion to suspend the rules. Alderwoman from the 1st.
I just wanted to make sure people noted that on the agenda it says 9.8. We actually have 15 million in the original bill, so I don't want people to be confused. We have the right bill on our desk, but it was just a little scrivener's error.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Report of special committees.
We have none.
Perfection consent calendar.
We have none.
Yes,
we do. We do. Sorry. Board Bill number 141 as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Tyus. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service authorizing the 2022 St. Louis Works and 50/50 sidewalk programs citywide, providing for the construction and reconstruction of gutters, streets, driveways, spot curbs, sidewalks, alleys, traffic controls, beautification, tree planting, resurfacing, and related engineering adjustments listed herein. Appropriating $15 million from the Street Improvement Fund, containing sections for description of the work, approval of the plans and specifications, work and material guarantees, estimated costs from the city funds and supplemental agreements, and reversion authorizations, applicable state and federal wage rate requirements, equal opportunity provisions, the mayor's executive orders, contract advertising statutes, and public work emergency clause.
We have two more.
Board Bill number 154 as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Davis. An ordinance to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of city residents by restricting motor vehicle access to alleys as provided herein in the Jeff Vanderloo Gate District West, Tiffany, and Midtown neighborhoods, and those proportions of the Botanical Heights and Shaw neighborhoods located within the boundaries of the 19th Ward, as has been established in ordinance number 68981. Board Bill number 156 as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Davis. Pursuant to ordinance number 70333 as amended by ordinance number 71394. An ordinance directing the director of streets to install speed humps and other traffic calming installations to calm the flow of traffic on certain blocks in the 19th Ward.
Alderman from the 23rd, you are recognized on the approval of the perfection consent calendar.
I move we adopt have the approval of perfection consent.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we adopt the the perfection consent calendar. Any discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
Amended.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
We could.
Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move that we pass, or that we make 141 as amended in bank.
There's been a motion from the Alderman from the 24th that we pass 141 in bank, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 4th. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Right. It has been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we adopt the perfection consent calendar. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Lappy. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Odenberg. Alderwoman Peel. Alderman Todd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Walker. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Grass. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. 27 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion to adopt the perfection consent calendar. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill Number 180, Committee Sub, as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Ingracia. An ordinance related to the establishment of right to counsel for tenants facing eviction or equivalent proceedings, a mechanism to provide counsel for all tenants in covered proceedings, a requirement for owners, agents of owners, and landlords to disclose to their tenants certain information regarding the right to counsel in covered proceedings, a plan for oversight and implementation of counsel for persons in covered proceedings, and a requirement for an annual report including a servability clause and an emergency clause.
Alderwoman from the 6th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 180, Committee Substitute as amended.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we perfect Board Bill 180, Committee Substitute as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we perfect Board Bill number 180, Committee Substitute as amended. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. As many of you know, Board Bill 180 establishes a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in the city of St. Louis. It's modeled after programs that are happening in about 15 other cities in 3 other states. This work started in New York City in 2017. There's lots of evidence that having representation in eviction proceedings is not only helpful to the tenant themselves, but also landlords. Most of you, I think, were part of or listened to the committee hearing where we had over 50 people testify in favor of this moving forward, not just including tenants themselves, but experts in this area. We had McCormick Barron, which is one of the largest affordable housing landlords in the city of St. Louis, support this, as well as the St. Louis City Housing Authority, and a few smaller mom and pop type landlords. And so I think it's incredibly important, evidenced by the success in other places. We know the eviction crisis is going to snowball again subsequent to the moratorium on evictions being lifted. A huge percentage of landlords that are coming into our city from out of state who are investor-owned properties and not being the responsible landlords that they need to be to ensure that the people who deserve to stay in their homes are able to do so for as long as possible. And I'm happy to take questions.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Madam President, members of the board, when I was in law school, we have something called Rule 13. Rule 13 says that if you have enough credits, you can practice law. I actually worked at legal services doing just this very thing, which was to keep people in their housing. I am also a landlord. I am a responsible landlord. I get so sick and tired of people vilifying landlords. I put a lot of money into my properties, as does my husband and people that I know, to make sure that they have a habitable place to live, that tenants have a habitable place to live, that they have a right to live in clean, safe environments. I have a string of rules that probably nobody else has in their lease. I write my own leases, so we don't tend to have problems at our properties. I got a lot of letters or emails from people saying, please vote for this board bill. I'm not opposed to tenants being represented. I did that. I did that while I was a landlord. I was set free to go and represent tenants by Dan Glazier, who's the head of legal services, who was then in housing, because I understood it. What I do not like is when that all landlords are treated the same, and some of the people who wrote to me said, well, we could keep them in the housing longer and we could pay less money. Why would I get less money for the places that I keep up? And why would I then have to go on and on and on back to court for somebody who just has not paid their rent or is a bad tenant? Now, there are things in the law that allow you, if they've committed a crime, like you can get them out in really 10 days if it's certain things that they do. And I do that if somebody starts to be a problem tenant. But my balancing of the scales is that when we pass the thing about not being able to evict people, I am now $7,000 to $8,000 in the hole. I will bring any of you all to any of my properties, and you can come and look at any time, not, you know, something that's planned, and my properties are taken care of. So why will I be treated the same way as a landlord that's a problem landlord? That's what I don't like. So the people who wrote to me saying, well, maybe they won't have to pay all the money. Yes, they should have to pay all the money. If you got where I live, if you rent from me and I keep my apartment up and you get in trouble, it is not my responsibility to provide housing. I am not the government. I am a small business owner, and I am not the government. And so then if the government wants them to stay in the housing longer, then they ought to pay their rent, because that is not fair. The city doesn't give them free water. The utilities don't give them free utilities. But somehow landlords are all vilified as these horrible people that don't do good housing. And that's just not true. And one of the things that happened with the law that we passed is a lot of about not being able to evict people, is it caught up a lot of small landlords. Maybe they lived in a two family and they rented the other one out, and they relied on that extra rent to pay their bills, or it was a 3 family or a 4 family. I am, again, not opposed to people having legal counsel at any means. I also was a public defender, so I represented people when they had criminal charges, and people would say, how could you represent those guilty people? I didn't represent any guilty people. I represented people who were accused of a crime. So the thing that I wish you would stop stressing, and it's not you, the sponsor, but the people who wrote to me, is about how you can let people stay in apartments longer and not pay the rent that's due them. That is not fair to small business owners who are doing the correct thing. So if you want to use legal maneuvers when you just stop paying your rent because you somehow think that I'm supposed to be responsible for the rent, then I think that there has to be a companion bill that says when you're doing these maneuvers that we have some kind of bond or something set up that if it comes out that the landlord hadn't done anything wrong, that the rent gets paid to the landlord, because otherwise it is not fair. And I intend to go and talk to Dan Glazier and some other people that I know in housing about how do you do this fairly, because just dragging something out so that people don't have to pay rent, when I evict people, it is because they didn't pay rent or they are a bad actor. And it's not, then they come in and say, oh, well, I just didn't have the money at the time. They don't come in and say, it's not a good apartment and it's not a safe place to live. But so giving them somebody that's a legal counsel that just wants to drag it out, that's not a good idea to me. Fighting a landlord that has a horrible condition, that water is coming in, that holes are in the wall, that they don't spray and they have all kind of mice and bugs and stuff, I don't have any problem with that. A landlord that has behavior problems, that the people are scared to come home, safety, I don't have any problem with that. I do have problems with categorizing all landlords as bad landlords. And even saying, well, a lot of them are from out of state. That doesn't make you a bad landlord. What makes you a bad landlord is if that you don't manage your property in a mindful manner. A lot of people don't like Section 8. One of the things that we've always done in our properties, we keep them half Section 8 and half market rate. You cannot tell the difference, because the difference is the management style. I'm a hands-on management person. My husband teases me because when he manages, they'll say, when is Miss Tice going to come back? And he says, you're so mean to them. I'm not mean to them. What I have is rules, and we follow the rules. So we have people that stay 15 years or more who say, I like living where I live because I know that it's going to be a good place for my family and I to live. So all landlords are not bad. I reject that category of bad landlords, evil landlords. They want some to get paid for people to live in. So does Gas Spire want you to pay. So does the city water department. They want you to pay. So does Ameren. They want you to pay. And MSD is just out of control with the bills that we now pay. I'm telling you, MSD is out of control. So if you talk about landlords, oh, and let's not forget the grocery store doesn't give free groceries either. I've never seen a grocery store. So please stop stereotyping And any of you all want to come to any of my properties, I will take you to them, because we did start out wanting to do good housing in North St. Louis. The Alderman from the 3rd has been, I have a property in his ward, he can tell you that my properties are all, in fact, we just spent $30,000 upgrading the bathrooms and the kitchens because we've been operating since 1989. Please stop acting as though all landlords are bad. There's some bad actor tenants too that do all kind of things, okay? There are some bad actor tenants. They tear your apartment up, they move people in it. I can show you pictures of what, I take pictures before people move in my apartment, and then I can show you pictures of some of them when they go out. And they're mad because once you start asking them to pay their rent in a timely manner, then they get mad. We put a tenant out who had been for a long time because he shot a gun off in our apartment. That allowed me to put him out in 10 days, and I did. He had been a very good tenant, but he started to get behavior problems. So if you manage your place correctly, you should get paid in a correct manner. And if somebody gets in trouble and can't pay their rent, then they need to go apply for resources from the government, not think that the landlord is responsible for that. There's no other group of people that you ask to pay for the services they provide. The grocery store does not pay for your services, neither do the utilities. And as I said, we need to do something about MSD because they are out of control. I looked at my bills of when I first moved in my house, and I look at them now, and we used to pay every 3 months, and I pay now twice what I paid every 3 months for 1 month at MSD, and they continue and come back every other year asking for an increase. So I am not opposed to tenants being represented. I am actually going to vote for this, but don't send me any emails saying about how you want to keep tenants in my apartment, irrespective of if I've done anything wrong or not, because we just don't want them to be homeless. I don't want them to be homeless either, and they can stay in my apartment unless they're a bad actor, but the government is responsible for that, not me. So when we put these kind of board bills together, we also need to put a way to compensate the people who we unintentionally harm. Not the bad actor landlords, but the good landlords that get caught up in this. If we're going to do this kind of thing, we need a companion bill that we pay those people, because it's not right. I'm out of $7,000 because I don't feel comfortable as an alderperson trying to get the stuff from the government. Okay, now to come back to the city where I actually represent somebody. So we just out of it because we did a board bill and an ordinance that ultimately the Supreme Court said was not legal. But I still don't have my $7,000. And we use that money to put back into my properties to keep them up, so they have central air, so they have heat, so they have flooring, so they have, we provide stove, refrigerator, dishwasher, and microwave. We provide a place in the backyard where they got porches, and they also have patios, and we're putting off-street parking. So we're continually upgrading our apartments, and small businesses cannot afford to lose money because we have done bad legislation, and that was a piece of bad legislation. You may think that keeping people from being evicted was good, but it's only good if you compensate the people that you're harming. So when we do this, I intend to find a way to say, if it's the tenant's fault and we have given them a right to have counsel, then we also provide a way to pay the landlords. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Madam President.
Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to first make note, there were several of us that added our names as co-sponsors in committee, and that did not make it over onto the bill that's in front of us. So I just want to make sure that I'm added as a co-sponsor, and there were several others.
Looks like Alderman from the 9th, Alderwoman from the 26th, Alderwoman from the 13th, Alderman from the 28th, Alderman from the 11th. Please add me as well. Alderman from the 12th, Alderman from the 18th.
Okay, thank you. So that was kind of where I wanted to start, but there's So what this bill does is establishes the right to counsel. It doesn't say anyone must be allowed to remain in an apartment or a home. It does not say, it's not actually any rental assistance. There's no money involved in this that is going directly to tenants or landlords. What it does is set up a system that people can get help getting through the legal process. And so when tenants are, it's the same as in the criminal justice system. When a criminal defendant is represented by counsel, that helps everyone. That helps everyone navigate the system in a way that makes sense. In the United States, we designate that the Constitution says that we shall have a right to assistance for criminal cases, but not for other legal cases. And eviction cases change people's lives and affect them for the rest of their lives. Even just the filing of an eviction case can remain on someone's record and keep them out of housing going forward. But this isn't even about keeping people necessarily in a space if it's unsafe or if they haven't paid the rent or if they can't afford to be in that. All we're doing is asking for assistance, helping them navigate the system. These proceedings can move incredibly quickly. They can get a hearing for the next week, and if they're not able to show up in person, then they can be evicted without even showing up in court, right? And we have a problem. The Alderwoman from the 6th has worked hard on preventing illegal lockouts in the city of St. Louis, and that is important work as well, that you can't be boarded out of your home with no access to be able to get any of your belongings without a court order. And so we continually need support to make sure that that is being enforced and people aren't losing all of their earthly belongings. So a couple of things I want to note. We would not be the first city that is doing this. There are several cities who already have these laws in place. I believe 15 municipalities. That it prevents people from falling into homelessness. It helps tenants navigate the system, and it helps landlords. So a lot of landlords, our bigger buildings that are bigger rental companies, are represented by big, aggressive attorneys. If you doubt what I'm saying, please go watch the John Oliver Last Week Tonight episode about rentals and tenants. One of our St. Louis attorneys is represented on there in quite shocking form. So please go check that out. And I'm not saying that he's representative of all attorneys. I am an attorney. We don't all act the same. But there is a system that is set up that if we don't help people navigate, we risk being on the back end of a much more catastrophic system. The more work that we can do to help them, maybe they just are crossing hairs. Maybe there is a situation where somebody didn't receive a check in the mail or didn't understand that the rent was going up or just needed a few extra days and had the money. So there are always going to be bad actor situations where someone is conducting unsafe behavior, they're harming other people in their building, they're destroying a property, all of those types of things. Like, those things do happen, and we're not saying you have to keep people in homes. What we're saying is giving them legal counsel so that they can walk carefully and purposefully through the system, so that they have a better shot at staying in their home, and so that the landlords have a better shot at a good tenant. I'm a tenant. I've been in my space for 9 years now, and my building is great, right? And I understand my lease. I understand my obligations. I've had a stable enough life and income at this point that I'm able to pay those bills every month. But there's for a lot of people, that is difficult. And as we're looking at a situation where more and more properties are being bought in cash, that are being bought by out-of-town investors, that are booting people out after they take over the buildings, the more protections that we have in place just to help people through the system, the better it is for all of our citizens. We're able to better maintain quality, affordable housing that people want to live in. And we're able to maintain our neighborhoods as true neighborhoods and not just investor-owned properties. So these are not trying to make blanket statements. There is a wide diversity of people who rent and a wide diversity of people who are landlords who own property and rent it out to others. And so I don't want any of us to put our situations in front of the greater good here. That we all have diverse experiences on this. The data shows that these types of programs work for the landlords, for the tenants, for the city. It keeps us on the back end from having to help people get new resources, get things that have been left behind, going and picking up all of the bulk that's left over after someone gets evicted and the landlord just dumps all of their belongings in the alley or on the street. That's a tax, or that's a burden on our refuse system. It's rehousing people. All of those things that we can maybe prevent if we're going through this a little bit more intentionally if we give people assistance. Even if we buy them 2 weeks so that they can find another place to live, get a moving van together, and get all of their things to a new space. All of that is great, and none of that is specifically included in this bill. This bill just says you shall have the right to an attorney to help you through the process. The last thing I want to highlight is we've had an incredibly successful mediation program that has been voluntarily done in the city of St. Louis. Over the course of the pandemic, it's run by advocates from WashU, I believe, maybe St. Louis University as well, but I believe WashU has a clinic of law students who are helping people, and those mediations have really helped. So they've helped the landlords and they've helped the tenants. And it's not a, you must keep this tenant no matter what type of situation, and you are not compensated to that money. That is not what those situations are. Those mediations are finding a way forward in the middle that works for both the landlord and the tenant. And that's what this legislation does. So I am really excited that we are taking this step forward. We know in the city we have a homelessness problem. Our kids in public schools are moving around a lot. We have, I believe it was a 20% homelessness rate for kids in our public schools. So the more that we can help people stay in their homes, the better. And I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 6th for being so dedicated to getting this work done. The amount of hours of meetings with stakeholders, with neighbors, they've had organizing meetings and they've done tenants education. They've gone and done outreach in all of these different neighborhoods, and it's an incredible amount of work to get to this point. So I rise with my full support for this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion, Alderman from the 28th.
I just want to make a quick point and emphasize that I don't really necessarily think that this bill is even bad for landlords. I think that this is something that really both sides should be in favor of and should get behind. I'll say from experience, I'm a litigator and I've gone into court before and had to deal with people on the other side that were not represented by counsel, and it really just makes the whole process a lot harder for everybody. I mean, I would as an attorney, I would almost always prefer having another attorney on the other side. And I think what we're going to see with this bill, and I think what I'm helpful for, and I agree with the Alderwoman from the first. We're not trying to keep people in places that they're not paying for, keep tenants that are really doing harm to units in there. But what I could see happening a lot if we would pass this would be, situations where, they come to court and if there's an attorney on both sides would make an agreement, hey, why don't we continue this for 30 days and come back and in 30 days you guys, move out on your own. And, I think that that's helpful for everybody because, we got a lot of good testimony at the hearing from folks talking about the Scarlet E problem. I never really had an appreciation for how much an eviction judgment really sticks on someone's record. So I think, what we can do, whatever we can do to help folks avoid that, helps them land on their feet. And then B, I know landlords, when they actually get an eviction judgment on someone and serve it and get someone booted out, a lot of those times, to the Alderwoman from the first point, those people aren't really motivated to clean the apartment up or do nice things to the apartment on the way out sometimes. So, if we can make the process of eviction and give it a chance to be more amicable and give it a chance both sides to be able to talk through it, so that landlord doesn't feel like I have to get a judgment today in court because the person's here right in front of me, and if I don't, I might never see him again. This just gives both sides options, gives both sides time to work things out. So I think that this is going to be one of those things that in a few years we're going to look back and everybody is going to be, glad we did it, and it's going to be like, oh, how would we ever do it without it? And I would also just note, I've talked to folks, like from the realtors and stuff, and no one's opposed to this. So, I think we should pass this, and I'm enthusiastically supportive of it. Thank you.
Alderman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to rise in support of Board Bill 180, Committee Substitute as amended. However, I would note that by rising in support of this bill, I am not necessarily rising in opposition to the comments made by the Alderwoman of the 1st. Now, as we are all very well aware, though I'm a legislator, I'm not a lawyer myself, so I have to approach legislation, and I've always had to approach it from a humanities perspective, from a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, from a what are other cities doing, from a what do I believe as a citizen and member of my community is best for the most people. And I believe that this is a bill that represents the most good for the most people. Are there landlords that are vilified or unfairly treated or unfairly demonized, perhaps I should say? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure there are. Are there renters that are likewise taken advantage of by the landlords, be they good renters or bad renters? Absolutely. What is so complicated about legislation and board bills and governance at its core is there are never simple answers. There's always so many variables. There's always so much human diversity and variety that it can be difficult to render a decision. With Board Bill 180 and with this present situation before us, at least in my own interpretation, it is not the good landlords. I myself, when I was running for alderman, was a scared little renter with an excellent landlord, but I wasn't even sure if I could run for office if I wasn't a homeowner. I wasn't sure what my rights as a renter were if something happened within the unit. It was a little shotgun apartment in South City, had beautiful yellow walls, loved it, miss it. Is there an opportunity that this might hurt a good landlord? I don't know that there is. Is there a reality that good tenants are currently being hurt by not having this before us? Because it's not tenants like me who would have had the financial resources to seek legal counsel if something had happened. It is not tenants that are able to, or landlords that are able to seek out their own legal representation. It's those that cannot. And I have to wonder, especially coming from the LGBTQ community, where so often, in the state of Missouri, you can be evicted. You can be denied housing just by merit of whom you love. Well, I have to think, what about my friends and my family in the community that don't have those same resources, but are renters? I have to think, what about my constituency that rents from companies in New York City or Atlanta or Houston? I have no idea if those were geographically correct, so bear with me, colleagues, but I have to wonder about them who've never met their landlord, who don't speak with their landlord, they speak with a toll-free number or so on and so forth. What are their rights in this? And in summation, yes, there are good landlords, and yes, there are bad tenants, but there's also bad landlords with good tenants. And it is those situations where I believe that there's an opportunity for this board bill to do the most good for the most people, fully recognizing that no piece of legislation can ever be perfect. So with that, I once more rise in support of Board Bill 180, Committee Substitute as amended. I likewise do agree with some of the viewpoints expressed by the Alderwoman of the 1st, and I would encourage all of us to see the forest not but for the tree, but for all of the trees. And with that, Madam President, I respectfully yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman from the 5th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I rise in support of Board Bill 180, Committee Substitute as amended. And for maybe a little bit different perspective, I am not opposed to landlords, property owners, by any stretch of the imagination. But as I shared with the bill's sponsor and others in the middle of the night via text messages, I shared with the sponsor the number of people in the fabulous Fifth Ward that I have had to personally go to bat for and help them avoid housing crises, help them to get into stable housing. I am not by any means against landlords and property owners. I just want tenants to have a fair share, a fair shake, to have legal representation, and in doing so, Madam President, I am confident that we will incrementally reduce our homelessness incidents in the city of St. Louis. With that, thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Alderman from the 18th.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in full support of Board Bill 180. I think if there's an error, we should always err on the side of the people. I think some of us are religious. I'm a Christian, so I don't want to take liberties with other people. But I think all of us who are Christians say we're made in the image of God. And nothing I've ever read in the New Testament says that we should take property rights over human beings. Let me say that, but I am not saying that we are not asking that the property be taken. We are not asking that people not pay rent. And I want to really respect the Alderwoman who wrote this bill. We are asking that tenants get counsel, legal counsel. That's all we are asking in this bill. And that the landlords already have all kinds of resources, most of them. First of all, they have a roof over their head. And after that, most have the ability to, and the legal mechanism to get the tenant out, because those are political decisions. And I say political decision because if everybody should really have a home, that should be a human right. That is a human right, and we can afford it. So that wouldn't even be an issue, but since it's an issue today, the least that the tenants should have, coming up against people with resources, knowledge, sometimes some of them have money, some of them have skills, because to be a landlord, I'm sure in many cases you would have more skills than a person who's renting, in many cases. So therefore, with all the resources and everything else, I think this gives the tenant an opportunity to keep their belongings and to get a fair shake. And so again, thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Board of all the people. I rise in full support of this.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st. Oh, okay. Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you. Our board bills are important. Our board bills should definitely provide opportunities to give our residents a better quality of life, but they also should have information in them too. Because when you say you shall have legal counsel, I was hoping that we could have indicated where that specifically would come from. I know the city of St. Louis for over 20 years, we've been providing education for tenants' rights and landlords' positions and authority. We funded those kinds of programs that long. And I also know that the legal services and Arch City Defenders and others have been providing free legal services for those for many years. And then, of course, our great universities, they all have law clinics that provide free services for our constituencies, and they go out of their way. The other part to that, as people learn about their rights and how to use them, is in many instances, the city of St. Louis intervenes anyway on behalf of a tenant when we're doing building inspections and/or we get a phone call based on a health concern. The health department has a lot of power. when an apartment is not in good living condition, and they move forward with that authority. And if you don't get all that you need and/or there's only so far they can go, I have used the state health department and shut down entire apartment complexes of multi-units. So we want to make sure that we are educating our public as well, and educate them even more. We have a public safety division that deals with nuisances, and that is another way that we find out about either bad tenants or bad landlords. And those things can be dealt with too with the various forms of enforcement, whether it's law, health, or whatever it may be. So I want to make sure that we are truly committed to not just saying something, but we are truly committed to all those entities that we already fund to make sure that they're operating properly and/or give them additional funding to have more available in these trying times for people. But I do know that the services are out here, and as you hear me say all the time, the better we educate our constituency, the better quality of life they can have, and they can also help their neighbors. So it's not about a board bill. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Let me first start. Parlez-vous français? Expectante dos, hablo español. I started out by saying I was going to vote for this bill. However, I bet you that nobody in this room has more experience with evictions on both sides than me. I was one of those people in law school working for legal services, keeping people in houses. I've been owning property for since 1979 when we started rehabbing. If the alderman, Madam President, I would inquire if the alderman from the 28th would yield.
The alderman from the 28th yield to questions from the alderwoman from the 1st. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Alderman, so you said you've had to deal with evictions before in the city of St. Louis. Is that where you dealt with them, or in Illinois, or where?
Not in the city of St. Louis. I've done all my things I've ever done evictions for have been in St. Clair County or Madison County, Illinois.
Well, I don't know how Illinois works, but I know there's nobody that gets an eviction in 30 days, okay? So that's the first thing. So even if your tenant is behind, is that how Illinois works, that normally it takes a little bit more than 30 days to get people out of an apartment?
I mean, if they're behind in their rent, the notice requirement's pretty quick, actually. You can get a judgment, in about that.
In 30 days? Then they need to come and teach that over in Missouri, because I've been doing evictions since the 80s. And so what happens normally if the tenant shows up and says, I need a continuance, they pretty much get one, okay?
Right.
So is that true? Is that what happens in Illinois?
Yep.
Okay, so mostly landlords don't start evictions right away. So by the time you get to an eviction, most times the tenants are 30 or 60 days behind. So if you get another 30 days, then you're 90 days, and then you get another 30 days. And so I do evictions in in St. Louis. So let me ask you this. So in Illinois, you have leases, and you didn't have people who are at will tenants because they don't have a lease, and so you can give them 30 days notice and they have to get out for no reason at all. Is that the same thing in Illinois?
I don't want to say anything incorrect. I don't know off the top of my head those are kinds of time requirements.
Okay, so that's what happens in Missouri, I can tell you. Thank you. I don't have any further questions for you.
Thank you.
So in Missouri, you don't have to have a lease to be a tenant. And if you do not have a lease, you don't have hardly any rights. And a landlord can put a lot of things in a lease, as long as they're not illegal, in which they're discriminatory, then you have to follow them. Thus, in my lease, I say you can't sit on the front porch hanging out, because that's where people enter. That's in my lease. You can't talk on the telephone and comb your hair. That's in my lease. So there's behavior things that are in my lease. I heard the Alderwoman from the 8th talk about setting things out. I actually wrote the law back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s about that it's illegal for landlords to set things out in the front of the apartments or front of the building now. So they can't do that. If they're doing it, it's illegal. In Missouri, you cannot get people out pretty much in 30 days unless you start like 5 days after they don't pay. If you go and you file it's still going to take you more than 30 days. So when a landlord shows up and the tenant hasn't paid, they're already 30, 60 days. The other thing that people talk about, we keep talking about landlords that are big. What I found in all my years is that a lot of time, the landlords who are renting out, who have a 2-family or a 4-family or a 3-family, they don't show up with attorneys either because they just own a piece of property and they're renting it out. So they don't have a real knowledge about what's going on. So that's my concern, is the small landlord, which I found out pretty easy because I started doing Rule 13 in 1986, I believe it was. And that was, again, me working for legal services, trying to keep people in their houses and in their homes. But over the years, I've learned, like I said, about the tenants that don't do the right thing, and also that there are all these smaller landlords, and that when we make laws that affect smaller landlords. So all of a sudden, if the tenant shows up with this power that the landlord can't do anything, then they use that power. During the time that we had the rule about you couldn't evict the tenants, you cannot believe the number of landlords, including myself, that heard from tenants that says, I'm not paying and you can't do anything about it. And they were lording it over the landlords. It's like, no, I'm not going to pay and I don't have to. So my concern is for smaller landlords who do not have a right to an attorney. And you bring somebody there and the tenant has not paid, the first thing the attorney is going to do is ask for a continuous, because that's what I did when I was for legal services. But is that right for the grandmother or the older person who owns a place and they may not make a lot of money and that's maybe their supplemental income? What I said again was that I was going to vote for it, but we often bring these board bills that are not inclusive of making sure that we protect other people. We're not just supposed to protect the people, to keep them in the houses at all costs. We also should protect small business owners, and that's what your grandmother or your aunt or somebody is when they're owning a 1 or 2 family apartment and they don't have resources. The reason I actually went to law school is because when we started to rehab, we had to pay so much money to lawyers that's one of the reasons I went to law school, because I wanted to better understand tenant landlord, and that's what I did. Now I can get you out pretty fast until this crazy law we had, because if you don't pay me in 5 days, I will start an eviction. It's in my lease. My tenants all know how to get a hold of me, and if you have a problem, if you tell me, I will work with you. The Alderman from the 8th said, well, don't bring your personal situations. That's when I look at the height of hypocrisy and privilege, because that's what she does. She brings her personal situation. I bring the personal situation that I've been doing evictions for a lot of years, and I've been helping people stay in houses for a lot of years. I've helped 4 of my tenants go to houses that Habitat built because they were such good tenants. I told them, you should not be paying rent. You should own your own property. They were such good tenants. They paid their rent on time. One of them moved in with a trash bag, and she moved into a Habitat house. Because I sat down with my tenants, I will teach them how to do a budget. I will explain to them that having cable is not more important than having a place to live and Ameren. So you have to make a lot of working class people that are on the edge, they're resentful of a lot of things because they see the very rich getting things and they see the very poor getting things. But there are a lot of people that are barely making it, seniors being one of them, and they don't get a lot of help. So what I do is I try to teach my tenants about responsibility of being a tenant, and this is where you live. No, don't just walk in there and don't pick up the trash. If there's trash in front of the building, you live here, pick it up, okay? Pick it up. Don't let your children go out to the trash and take bags of trash and then put it by the trash can, because it's by where you live. Don't bring your friends over honking in front of the building, because you're disturbing everybody. And you can talk to any of my tenants, they'll tell you that. Ms. Tyus is really good to us. A few years ago, I was on this floor, and they locked up one of my tenants, and I went and I was his lawyer and got him out and got that case dismissed because they would not give him bond, and they kept moving his bond back. He came in January, and finally in April I had to intervene. And soon as Alderwoman Tyus called, all of a sudden the judges gave him a bond hearing and he was out of there, and ultimately his case was dismissed. So I like the people who rent from me. I'm not scared of tenants, but I'm also telling you truthfully, don't make it that it's all pie in the sky with the tenants also, because I have now 40-something years of experience, and that makes me have to be careful about we're passing these laws and acting like that it's only going to affect the big bad landlords that are doing things wrong. If the Alderwoman from the 6th would yield.
Would the Alderwoman from the 6th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 1st?
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Did you hear me say, first of all, that I was going to vote for this bill, but I had questions about it? Did you hear that?
I sure did.
Thank you. So then what happens if you have the grandmother and she doesn't? Because I'm telling you, I know a lot of older people, they got a little two-family, they live in one, they rent it out. What happens then when the tenant shows up with a lawyer and grandma doesn't have a lawyer?
I think that's a fair question, and I think that the board bill is designed because of the high percentage of tenants that are never represented by a landlord and the number of landlords that typically are, but that doesn't prohibit a poor outcome for the landlord who is not represented. It's just not something that happens typically. And I haven't had no one come to me saying that I needed to be worried about advocating for landlords. And as I mentioned, we did have several small landlords indicate that they were supportive of this. There are studies from other cities that have already implemented this where both landlords and tenants say that it's working well for them.
And I know because there's so many bad landlords, that's why you have the advocacy, and nobody knows about. I just had a friend bought a building, person was in it, several people were in it. I advised him start eviction proceedings immediately because they were already several months behind when he bought the building. He said, oh no, I'll just talk to them, I'll get them out. This just happened. 4 months later, he's just getting them out because, of course, they lied right to his face. Wasn't anything he did. They just continued not to pay the rent. And though when they went to the court, they said, well, we don't know if he owns that property or not, even though he could prove he owned the property. And he ended up 4 months more into debt because they had not paid their rent. So it happens a lot. When I was legal services, I wish a lot of people showed up that were landlords, and they were small. That's why I'm more careful about it now. When I was in legal services at first, I was just like, those just what I hear from you guys. But when you've been actually doing that, you see another side of the story. Not that it happens the way it should, but I'm just saying with small landlords, that happens too, and they don't know what to do. Okay, and they don't have anybody to turn to. So I have no problems in people staying in property and also fighting the landlords who don't make the property habitable. If it's inhabitable, nobody should be paying you rent. I'd rather get them out of there than to keep them in a place that has holes in the wall, windows cracked, mice, roaches, other bad actors that live there. That's not a good place to raise your family. So I'm for that. I'm just not for making a law that's also unfair. Then you have an unintended consequence because people haven't advocated for that or said that. And that's just what I've found as I've done that. It's when I go into court for my own building, then people say, you're a lawyer? Oh, I own a building. And then they're trying to get me. And these are the small people that I meet that own these properties. So I'm telling you, it's not going to fix the other side of it. That's why I'm saying, how do we fix it for not somebody who owns 5,000 properties and a foreign investor? It is for, I really do care about grandma, you know, because a lot of seniors, and you know, you've heard me advocate before about let's not put every kind of application online or whatever. A lot of seniors don't have that kind of access. So I'm still going to vote for it, but I'm going to say that we need to look at what if we have seniors that show up and then we have somebody represented. Do we then say, well, we want to make sure that they have somebody can tell them, because they don't know. They don't, you know, my mother's 87 years old. She's handling a piece of property for my sister. Now, she can call me, but my mother doesn't know how to handle that property. And if she would have to show up in court, it cost me a little bit more money because we had to move it, but I didn't put their stuff out on the street. But I just think that this bill is should be directed toward larger landlords, and that we maybe need to tweak this to make it better for smaller landlords that don't have the resources that people assume that they have. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Alderwoman from the 27th.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I agree with Alderwoman Tyus, but I want it to be known, Alderwoman Tyus is a unique landlord. So let's just be real. She's unique to other landlords. But when you have a landlord that has 15 properties in your ward and renting to people that's unsafe and unsanitary, it's a challenge. And so my heart is going out to the people that's renting and getting in situations. And as Alderwoman Davis said, they don't know. The renters don't understand. They don't know processes. They don't know how to get help. And so me being a landlord, I have people that can't pay their rent. And so, as Alderwoman Tyus said, I still have to keep the repairs up on the property. I still have to pay the bills that's due there. But at least my renters are trying to get assistance. But you have some renters that won't even go apply for the help to get the rent paid. So it's really a catch-22. This bill is a catch-22. I don't think that people want to address to people like Alderwoman Tyus, because the people that rent for me, at Christmas, I don't even charge them rent, because that's my Christmas to them. But you have landlords that care enough and want to take care of their tenants. But you also have tenants, and I had Section 8, that destroy your property. So you paying double to try to get your property back in shape to get ready to rent to somebody else. So it's really a catch-22 all the way around. And so I'm not even looking at the people that have 15, 20 buildings, but I'm looking at the small people that are trying to rent property to people that are trying to do right. But again, when you have those, I call them slum landlords that don't care, just come once a month, pick up the rent, and do no improvements to their property, that's not fair to those tenants. So it's a catch-22 on this whole situation. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 6th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to quickly address some of this most recent conversation, this bill is not intended to punish.
Alderwoman Rice. Aye. Alderman Gunther. Aye. Alderman Balmer. Aye. Alderman Lappy. Aye. Alderman Stevens. Aye. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderwoman Howard. Aye. Alderman Odenberg. Aye. Alderwoman Peel. Aye. Alderman Todd. Aye. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Aye. Alderwoman Keys. Aye. Alderwoman Walker. Aye. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Narayan. Aye. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Boyd. Aye. Alderman Gross. Aye. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Cone. (27 aye votes, 1 abstain).
By your vote, you've sustained the motion from the Alderwoman from the 6th on the perfection of Board Bill number 180, committee substitute as amended. Third reading consent calendar.
Board Bill number 189, introduced by Alderman Cone. Board Bill number 162, introduced by Alderman Stevens, Rice, Schweitzer, and Gunther. Board Bill number 132, introduced by Alderwoman Davis, Vaquero, Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderwoman Peel, Alderman Boyd, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Evans, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Gunther, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Board Bill number 143, introduced by Alderwoman Peel.
This is consent, so.
Board Bill number 158, introduced by Alderman Oldenburg. Board Bill number 166, introduced by Alderwoman Middlebrook. Board Bill 171, introduced by Alderman Kotar. Board Bill number 187, introduced by Alderwoman Spencer, and Board Bill number 55, introduced by Alderman Odenberg.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Alderman from the 23rd, put your phone down. You are recognized on the motion to adopt the third reading consent calendar.
I move we adopt the third reading consent calendar.
All right, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd. We have a second from the Alderman from the 6th. Any discussion? All right, we may proceed. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Balmer.
Aye.
Alderman Lappy. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Odenberg.
Yeah, okay. Aye.
Alderwoman Peel. Alderman Todd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Walker. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Gross. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderman Cone. 25 aye votes.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion from the Alderman from the 23rd to third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills. Third reading, report of engrossment, and final passage.
Board Bill number 137, Committee Sub as amended, introduced by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, President Green, and Alderwoman Rice. An ordinance to provide for independent investigations of law enforcement misconduct and use of force incidents and repealing ordinance number 71556, and enacting in lieu thereof of a new ordinance that reconstitutes and provides staff support for the Civilian Oversight Board and provides coordination and staff support for the Detention Facility Oversight Board, created under ordinance number 71430 and establishing the Division of Civil Rights Oversight within the Department of Public Safety and authorizing the establishment of Public Integrity Unit directed by the Circuit Attorney in the City of St. Louis.
Alderwoman from the 26th, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 137, Committee Substitute as amended.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 137, Committee Sub as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 26th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 137, Committee Substitute as amended. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Everybody is familiar with the importance of this bill as we have continued a conversation about Black history and being Black History Month down here. It's interesting to me some of the things that continue to go on and some of the, what I like to call, creative confusion that continues to go on. So you can go back. You heard me say I'm a nerd. I watched these videos 20-some years back, 10-something years back. Go back, watch the hearings about civilian oversight in the city of St. Louis. Look up the bills about civilian oversight in the city of St. Louis and see how people voted. See how people spoke in the committees. See how they carried legislation. How important this is to the civilians, the people that we are called and elected down here to represent. The people that I hear from all the time. Last week, a comment was made about not bringing certain people to the table. And I want to speak to that today because there were people out of those organizations that did come to the table. And they have been calling on this kind of legislation and this kind of voice for our people for a long time. But Out of respect, I didn't talk about them much during the hearings. I just talked about community voices. But there are people, good people, every day that do this job that feel like this is what is needed to build the community, the transparency, the advocacy, and the accountability back in policing. We have an incomparable team set up for civilian oversight here in the city of St. Louis. And for the first time since this fight began, we do not have civilian oversight in the city of St. Louis. After all the work that our elders and our people and people down here at this board fought for, I wonder what has changed. I really wonder what has changed, because the need for it hasn't changed. The instances haven't changed. And this morning, when I was working with people and serving with people at the Hardy's Rise and Shine thing, I talked to people that said, hey, I saw the work that you're doing, and this is not against police. And we know the need, and we know the advocacy piece of that, but we also know where those narratives come from and what the intention is to continue division. So if we ever want to get past this, I'm asking my colleagues to vote your own hearts and your own minds for your own constituencies and reinstate civilian oversight here in the city of St. Louis today.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 26th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 137, Committee Substitute as amended. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Balmer. Alderman Lappy. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Oldenburg. I'm sorry, was that a no? I'm sorry, was that a no, Alderman Oldenburg? Alderwoman Peel. Alderman Todd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Walker. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Gross. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Cone. 21 aye votes. I'm sorry, 19 aye votes, 2 no votes, 1 abstain, and 2 present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 26th to third read and finally pass Board Bill number 137, Committee Substitute as amended.
Board Bill number 183, Committee Sub as amended. Introduced by President Green and Alderman Cone. The proposed bill amends and revises ordinance number 62885, which imposes a 1% sales tax, known as the Capital Improvements Sales Tax, on all retail sales made in the city of St. Louis, which are subject to taxation under the provisions of sections 144.010 to 144.525, revised state Missouri, and provides for the allocation of such funds for the purpose of funding capital improvements, including allocations for ward capital improvements, so the allocations for the ward capital improvements for each ward shall be made equally.
Alderman from the 16th, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 183, committee substitute as amended.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to third read and finally pass Board Bill 183, committee substitute as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 183, committee substitute as amended. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I renew my motion.
Any discussion? Seeing none. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 183, committee substitute as amended. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Ballmer. Alderman Lappy. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Odenberg. Alderwoman Peel. Alderman Todd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Walker. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Gross. President Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Peel. Alderwoman Walker. Did I get you? You voted no. 3. Alderman Cone. 20 aye votes, 4 no, 1 present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion for the Alderman from the 16th to third read and finally pass Board Bill number 183, committee substitute as amended.
Board Bill number 130, introduced by Alderman Kotar, Alderman Stevens, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and the Board of Public Service authorizing and directing a supplemental appropriation in the total amount of $30 million into the annual city budget established by ordinance number 71505, approved June 30th, 2022 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023, for deposit into the project fund defined below of the St. Louis Municipal Finance Corporation Leasehold Revenue Bonds, Series 2020, for continuing improvements to the Chavantes Convention Centers owned by the City of St. Louis, Missouri, and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 7th, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage, Board Bill 130.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to third read and final pass Board Bill 130.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 130. Any discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
I believe that I was asked to be a co-sponsor during committee on this one, so just correct it. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 7th, you're recognized to close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 130.
Request previous roll. Did everyone vote for the last thing?
Hearing no objection to previous objection. Okay. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Lappy. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Odenberg. Alderwoman Peel. Alderman Todd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Walker. Alderman Vaquero. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Grass. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Cone. 25 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 7th to third read and finally pass Board Bill number 130.
Board Bill number 64, Committee Sub as amended, introduced by Alderman Cone, President Green, Alderman Gunther, and Alderman Narayan. An ordinance approving policies and procedures in connection with the consideration of development proposals and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 9th, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill number 64, Committee Substitute as amended.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 64, Committee Substitute as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 64, Committee Substitute as amended. Alderman from the 9th, you may proceed.
Renew my motion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 64, Committee Substitute as amended. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. There's been a request for previous roll. Hearing no objections, motion passes.
10. Board Bill number 120 as amended, introduced by Alderman Bosley and Alderwoman Peel. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment appropriating a portion of funds received under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2022, published license number 117-2, March 11, 2022, ARPA. Authorizing certain expenditures of such funds to the extent received, authorizing contracts and other documents to expend the funds to the extent received, containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 3rd, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 120 as amended.
Thank you. I move that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 120 as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we third read and final pass Board Bill 120 as amended. Alderman, you may proceed.
All right. Once again, Board Bill 120 is an appropriation of ARPA funds for our infrastructure needs. And if anybody has any questions or comments, we'll take them. All right. With that, I renew my motion.
No further discussion. Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderman from the 6th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 120 as amended. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook, Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Evans, Alderman Page, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderman Kotar, Alderwoman Rice, Alderman Gunther, Alderman Valmer, Alderman Lappy, Alderman Stevens, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Odenberg, Alderwoman Peel, Alderman Todd, Alderwoman Davis, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderwoman Keys, Alderwoman Walker, Alderman Vaquero, Alderman Ryan, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Gross, President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Evans. Alderman Page. Alderman Cone. 25 aye votes.
By your vote, you've sustained the motion from the Alderman from the 3rd to 3rd read and finally pass Board Bill number 120 as amended.
Board Bill number 55, introduced by Alderman Odenberg. The bill will amend City of St. Louis Revised Code Chapters 4.18.055, 4.18.080, 4.18.225, 4.18.315, 4.19.120, 4.19.130, 4.19.140, and 4.19.70 to permit the Firemen's Retirement System Board of Trustees to also act as the St. Louis Firefighters Retirement Board Plan of Trustees. The provisions of this bill would not become effective until such time as amendments to Missouri Revised Statutes 87.140, 87.145, 87.155, 87.260, and 87.350 have become law to permit the Firemen's Retirement System Board of Trustees to also act as the Board of Trustees of the St. Louis Firefighters Retirement Plan.
Alderman from the 16th, you are recognized on Board Bill number 55.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. At the request of the sponsor, we're going to put this back on the informal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Report of engrossment.
Report of engrossments, Board Bill number 189, Board Bill number 162, Board Bill number 132, Board Bill number 143, Board Bill number 158, Board Bill number 166, Board Bill number 171, Board Bill number 187, Board Bill number 137, Committee Sub as amended, Board Bill 183, Committee Sub as amended, Board Bill number 130, Board Bill number 64, Committee Sub as amended, and Board Bill 120 as amended.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix her signature hereto to the end that these may become law.
Go ahead. Hill.
Courtesy resolutions consent calendar. Aldermen from the 23rd, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolutions consent calendar.
Yeah, there we go. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolution calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. Any discussion? Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move that we make Resolution 187 in bank, please.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 24th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we make resolution number 187 in bank. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we adopt the courtesy resolution calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. First reading resolutions.
We have none.
Second reading of resolutions, committee reports, and adoptions.
Resolution number 171, introduced by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, President Green, and Alderwoman Ingracia. Responsibility leveraging of settlement funds.
Alderwoman from the 26th, you are recognized on the second reading and adoption of resolution number 171.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we second read and adopt Resolution 171.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 26th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 8th, that we adopt Resolution 171. Any discussion? Alderwoman from the 26th.
I just note that in committee, I think we had a lot of good discussion about some ideas that we would offer, right, to the new 14 about leveraging these funds. And then I got calls afterwards and even before about this community engagement process and how people want this, right? They want to be able to be involved in how we'll leverage and use, spend, and invest and make decisions about this landmark settlement fund. So I think that we came up with some good ideas in committee about having some specific town halls around even our own. And when I say our own, I'm talking about our employees, city employees, having specific town halls around our seniors and making sure that they are engaged and reached out to in different ways. Meeting people where they are up until when they reach out to us in different ways. Like I'll just briefly say, everybody knows Queen Thomasina in our communities, and she said, why don't we look at some street common measures with this money that hasn't been looked at and our other things, building up on what we started with the ARPA funds with this, again, landmark settlement money. So I'm excited and encouraged about this. There's been a lot of good feedback about making sure that the community is involved in this process, which is something that our mayor has prided herself on. So I thank you again for the hearing, for Alderman Oderberg for calling the hearing and us having good conversation around the good ideas to start, to gear up, to tee up the next 14 in this process.
Thank you. Alderman from the 9th.
Madam President, I just ask that we put Resolution 171 in bank.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 13th, that we make Resolution 171 in bank. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I also want to thank the Alderwoman from the 26th for bringing this. The committee discussion was great. Just highlighting that we can have town halls, we can have discussions and suggestions about this money on all sorts of different topics. I want to highlight there's a lot of sort of structural capital that's in the resolution, and I just want to encourage the next board, whoever is down here, and the President's office and the Mayor's office, in considering the human capital aspect of this as well. So whether that's early childhood education, other types of anti-poverty measures, youth programming, things like, or even the raises for city employees. You know, we talked about that, and I know that Alderwoman just mentioned that. Alderwoman from the 13th mentioned in committee as well. There's this kind of transformative amount of money that we're investing smartly right now can be such a benefit to the city going forward. And so thank you for bringing this and setting the tone of collaborative community involvement as we move forward. So thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 26th?
That just made me think I needed to bring up the fact that I thanked Alderman Oderberg for calling the hearing, but I should also thank Alderwoman Schweitzer for chairing the hearing, which was her first chairing the hearing by herself. So thank you.
Alderwoman from the 19th.
Oh, thank you so much. I did sit in and listen to that committee hearing. I'm not on the committee. One of the things that I was impressed with was the additional ideas that came out. Because yes, you're an elected official, yes, you're an alderperson, but at the end of the day, you work for the people. And if you're not going to listen to them, and if you're not going to empower them and educate them, there's no purpose to any of this. Also, don't go and get people in that position of, oh, woe is me, I am poor, I'm going to stay poor, when you don't have resources to take care of them. Ongoing, stable resources, not a one-time pot. So, as the new board sits, I hope someone educates them on Economics 101 and what that means. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 26th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 26th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 8th, that we second read and finally adopt resolution number 171. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, February 13th, 2023, Committee for Long-Term Healthcare Special Committee will meet at 3 p.m. via webinar. And Thursday, February 16th, 2023, Transition to 14 Wards Committee will meet at 11 a.m. via webinar.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We'll be holding an Education and Youth Matters Committee meeting on February 22nd at 11 a.m. We're hearing from the St. Louis Research Collaborative that's working with SLPS on student mobility. They have a presentation they'd like to discuss with us, and so we'll be hearing from that. Anybody is welcome to join us. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 10th.
Test. Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, as senior member of the board, I will announce that following this meeting, my office will be open for beverage consultation. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. It's a big weekend in Soulard. We've got the Taste of Soulard and the Purina Pet Parade on Sunday. So come on down. Weather's going to be great. Beer will be flowing, and there'll be lots of food available. Thanks.
Further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 23rd, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
I'd like to excuse the Alderman of 25th for necessary absence. Everybody else was here.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 8th, that we excuse the Alderperson from the 25th for necessary absence.
Yeah, I was going to
believe he's as a necessary absence.
We will make note of that in the record. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Still saying motion carries. The ayes, you got to get louder. Alderman from the 23rd, you are recognized on the motion to adjourn.
First, we got to do it. I should have motioned that Greg couldn't make the meeting, but anyway, he's sick. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I move that we adjourn until April the 17th, 2023, which is the sign-in die.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we adjourn until April 17th, 2023. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.